Good morning. My name is Suzanne Kelly. I'm a member of Westminster's Social Justice team. The social justice forums are built around a common theme, and this year the theme is moving from understanding to transformation, affecting change together, guided by God. Through these forums, we want to explore capabilities that we need to build and norms that we need to examine in order to be effective transformational partners in our community. This morning, we are pleased to welcome Michelle Witte, Executive Director of the League of Women Voters of Minnesota. Michelle will be addressing the results of the 2023 Minnesota legislative session and describe how we can be effective transformational partners to encourage voter turnout and safe elections. Before we get started, just a couple of items. For those attending in person in the MISO room, raise your hand, please, and we will bring a microphone to you so that all, including those on the live stream, can hear your question or your comments. And you said it would be okay for them to raise their hands at any time. For those attending on the live stream, please submit your comment or question in the live stream chat, and we will monitor that and raise your question or comment. As part of our ongoing effort to promote respectful conversations around concerns in our community, the social justice team has established guidelines for social justice forums that you will now see on the screen. Please take a minute to review these. Yeah. Thank you. Before we get started, a short prayer, please. Let us pray. Holy One, God of justice, breathe into us today a spirit of curiosity and humility. Let us engage with mindfulness, following the lead of voices from our community. Guide our speech and our self-awareness so we may honor the divine in all people. Amen. Please welcome Michelle. Good idea.
Good morning, good morning. It's great to be here. And if my great friends, my neighbors, Frank and Rosemary Nelson, are in Vermont, if they're watching, hello, Frank and Rosemary. Otherwise, they'd be here. But before we get started, I love the topic, transformation. And I would say that my personal transformation around social justice became when I was part of the Lutheran campus ministry, the University of Minnesota in 1981. I think most of you in the audience remember the 80s. You remember the 80s? So we're going to talk a little bit about the 80s. So I also became a member of the Lutheran student movement and was the secretary for international concerns. And growing up in Columbia Heights, Minnesota, I really didn't know there was really anything going on in the world at that time until I got to college. And I was like, oh my goodness. There was this little thing called apartheid. Remember that? We were on the bus for Washington protesting against that. And then there was this little war in Central America, remember? So I went to Nicaragua and El Salvador and Honduras and thought, oh my gosh, there's wars here. And our government's lying to us. And what is going on? So I would say my awakening really became through my faith and looking at, well, what would Jesus do here? It always seems really easy to me personally, doesn't it? But it's a complicated question. But the idea, I think, and why I really want to applaud you being here today, is everything starts with education, right? We don't know what's going on. When we know more, doggone it, now we have to do more because we realize, well, I can't forget that now. And so some days I just don't want to learn a new thing, right? But I like to put that in a context because sometimes in our lives when we look at all the things going on around us, one of the things I like about aging, I'm 61 now, and is perspective, right? And so having been involved in the social justice movement in the 80s, we protested, remember? I mean, apartheid came apart, remember? There were illegal wars in Central America, and people went to prison for lying to us for that. So I also want to set this up just a little bit because of the times we're in. I'll tell you more about the League of Women Voters, of course, which I adore. But nonpartisanship, the League of Women Voters is a 501c3, and we are nonpartisan. That means we do not endorse, like you all here in 501c3 Church, we do not endorse or oppose candidates or political parties. But we very much participate, we learn. The League is big on studies, consensus studies, programs, and action. It's absolutely not partisan to be involved in issues as long as we're not supporting or opposing candidates and parties. And I often remind people it's the other way. We don't not act on something that's important to us because of their party. Because sometimes people think, well, we can't act on this issue. So we can't say January 6th was horrifying because it's partisan to say that. It's not partisan to have a perspective on the issue, right? It's whether or not it's the candidates. And our issues with the League of Women Voters, most of them have been around for 50 to 100 years, but different political parties take them up at different times. So I want to lay that construct out because I think it's really important for what we're saying today. I think a lot of times we think about, I don't want to get involved in politics. And everything is politics. Things are political, meaning there are issues, there are points of view. And that's different than being involved in electoral candidate politics, all right? Does that make sense? Does anybody have any questions about that? Because I like to lay that out there right away. And so I love this first slide. And just what we're saying, all this is one of the original banners from the suffragists that we have here at the Minnesota Historical Society. All this comes of teaching girls to read. Doggone it, they get educated, and things happen, right? So on the far left is a picture of the University of Minnesota Women's Suffrage Club, 1918. The far right, voter registration volunteers at our naturalization ceremonies. So we are still registering to vote. We register almost 13,000 new voters every year through the naturalization ceremonies of all our new citizens. And so part of the whole part, and I think of what your mission is here and what you're looking at about transformation, was, when women were trying to get the right to vote, which happened in 1920, what they didn't want it just for the privilege. It's like, I want to vote and we deserve to vote. Well, that's true. But they wanted it for the change they could make in the world, right? That's what our rights allow us to be able to do things, to be who we want to be, to have the liberties we want in life, and to work for change that we see as appropriate. We see a lot of different reasons for change, and that's great. So, but what they did was so smart, is the suffragists said, wait, now we have these great suffrage organizations. They disbanded them and created the League of Women Voters because now we need to train women at the time how to be involved. So they held civic schools all over the country. Carrie Chapman Catt was here in Minnesota to launch our Minnesota League in 1919. I have the original program from that convening. I mean, it's like it's so cool when you find these original documents. But as soon as they had the right to vote, women hit the ground running. And one of the very first things that happened was actually Nellie Griswold Francis, who was African-American woman who was involved in the Every Woman Suffrage Club. There were women of color involved in suffrage. They weren't always treated well. But Nellie Griswold Francis here in Minnesota, she was awesome. And she actually testified. We think she was really the first woman, certainly the first woman of color, to testify before the Minnesota legislature in 1920. And what she did was really work on the lynching ban. So, remember this, it just happened in 1920 was the horrible lynching of 4 black men in Duluth. And her original testimony is at the Historical Society. So women were like, let's go, right? So they did. And so here we are. So 104 years later, we're still here. So we're kind of semi-proud of the fact that we're still here doing the work. Registering voters, I love this on the far left. This is actually this woman right here is Clara Euland, who was our first first president of the League of Women Voters. Her granddaughter is a fabulous artist here in Minneapolis. And on the right, there we are still registering voters. So we're kind of like the constant press, right? So things happen, things go up, things go down, but the League has been here doing the sort of steady stream of democracy. The other things you see the League do a lot of is candidate forums, right? So candidate forums are kind of our jam. We love to educate voters about candidates, and without any, just openly let them, that's how voters come to know more about the candidates. It used to be the National League used to hold the presidential debates. Of course, it's a media circus now for those big debates. But we do in Minnesota several hundred candidate forums a year, more than any other state. And we've been asked by people like the Minnesota School Board Association. I used to serve on our school board, and I've built relationships there. And they've said, could you do more candidate forums in school districts in greater Minnesota? Because we've lost a lot of newspapers, right? It's hard to get to know about candidates sometimes. So that's a big centerpiece of what we do. The other thing we do is our Vote 411. So we have a statewide voter guide for every election down to county coroner, which I didn't know you could elect, but in some counties you can. We love our little League Voting Violet, our League llama there. So we'll talk about Vote 411 on the end. And we do know that the number one reason people don't vote is they don't know the candidates. They don't know the issues. So that is something we continue to work on. So we're going to spend a little time today talking about the transformation that took place this legislative session. So the last time I spoke here was a couple of years ago. We were bemoaning the fact that we're still working on all of these different voting rights, very much priorities for us. And the first one is the restoration of voting rights for felons. So people who have left prison behind, they've served their sentence, they're living in the communities. They may still be on probation or parole, but they're in their communities, they're working, they pay taxes, and they want to be connected to, this, in terms of even just preventing recidivism, being connected to communities and having that voice is important. This is something the League and others have worked on for over 20 years. And we did it. So it was exciting. What was perhaps most exciting for me personally, having been at the League for 6.5 years, that during that time, when we had divided government, in a lot of ways, it's really great to have compromise. We support compromise as a governmental solution to big problems. The challenge was in divided government is nothing moved forward, right? Because everything was stuck. So you would testify and go before a committee, and everything would just be laid to the end till all the leaders got together at the end and decided what to do. It was extraordinarily frustrating. So this year, that's the top of my head, just in case you want to know, right back there. So this year was so great because we testified, but there was rigorous debate. That's all we want, right? Rigorous debate at the table and floor votes like it should happen. And so it was an exciting time. So this is really helping to reenfranchise 55,000 new voters in the state of Minnesota, but likely double that, because what we find among people who have left prison is they just think they can't vote ever again, because that was kind of the message. I've had a felony and that's it. And so and what I had was the privilege, if you don't know anybody, if you know someone who's had a felony, this makes sense to you. And this is another part of transformation, right? It's like knowing people who aren't like us so we can understand someone's reality, that we can put that to action, right? So I had the privilege of getting to know 4 amazing people who have left prison behind, some very recently, who worked on social justice and civil rights things in prison, who had fabulous stories to tell. And so I can see the power. Imagine people really saying, this is so important. The vote is that important to me. But I think about that in terms of transformation, because, again, if you don't know anyone, you're like, well, Why is that important? When you know someone who's been affected by the justice system, you start to see how important that is. So I cried a lot during this one. It was a thrilling win, and it's also a spilling over. So much of this work that we do, as you all know, in social justice, is you do the work and you have to know you may never see the result of that work. So think about the suffragists, right? 1848, Seneca Falls. 72 years later became the 19th Amendment. So I'll often say to young people, well, how many of you would work on a committee if you knew it was going to take 72 years to make a difference? I mean, who would raise their hand to that? But that is what it takes, because we are here today because people who were ahead of us gave us rights. We need to do what we do because people behind us are coming up and they're counting on it. So it is a jiggle, right? We can't just say, well, doggone it, my candidate didn't win, my issue didn't pass. It's like, too bad. We do the work, and eventually it spills over, which was what was so exciting about this year. Another big one we've been working on for, 50 years. So it was 50 years ago that Joan Grow was Secretary of State and brought us same-day voter registration, which has kept Minnesota at the top of voter turnout. In the state of Minnesota, we battle with our sister leagues on who has Maine and Oregon and Colorado sometimes, but basically we have the highest voter turnout in the country. And but we don't have some of these kind of signature pieces. Automatic voter registration is awesome. Now, here's another reason automatic voter registration is awesome. So right now we have what's called motor voter. So if you go to update anything at the DMV, you can ask them to also register to vote or update or whatever. But you have to opt in, right? Now you would opt out. You will be automatically registered to vote, which does not mean you have to vote, right? It also means you could say, I don't want to be registered to vote if you don't want to. But this is like the ultimate thing for people who are concerned about the integrity of our elections, and we'll talk about that before we leave here today. If people are really worried, well, are people who they are? Are they really voting on election day? What's great is that automatic voter registration is at the time you're verifying your ID, you're registered to vote. So it is the most comprehensive way to ensure that people are being registered whose ID matches who they are. So this is a win-win for everybody, regardless of your issue. Pre-registration of 16 and 17-year-olds, big one. We know younger people need to get engaged, get involved. Being able to pre-register them, get them excited about voting and getting ready for that 18. And this really also ties to that automatic voter registration, because when a 16-year-old, if they get a driver's license now, they're automatically registered to vote. But that means we should start talking to them about what that means, right? So I love this picture. This was the bill signing on the day of what we called House File 3, where a lot of bills were passed, and I'll walk through a lot of those. But it was very exciting to see a lot of these things happen. Other things that happened as a result of House File 3. So now if you want to say, hey, I don't really want to go to the polls anymore. I just please send me my absentee ballot. Rather than, oh shoot, did I ask? Remember if I asked for a ballot? Now you can be on a permanent list, which is nice, right? You can just have it always sent to your home, not worry about it. There's a lot of these other little things that's little things, but I want to talk about assistance to voters. So requirement to limit physical assistance in marking ballots to no more than 3 individuals is removed. So you're like, well, why would it take more than 3 people to help you fill out your ballot? Well, as we look at a lot of different people who for whom English is not their first language, and of course Minnesota is very proud and has been since the 1800s, bringing our immigrants into our state and naturalizing them into all we do. There's a lot of people who are really nervous about, well, I don't know that I'll know what's on the ballot. And a lot of people come as families. And so this also makes it really so nice for the election judges. They don't have to say, okay, there's how many of you can be here, those kinds of things. So a lot of these things really can make an impact. We're excited about. This is another one. Foreign language. We will now have 12 languages represented in our ballots and our basic voter information materials. They're now in, I think, 3 languages, 3 or 4. And again, Secretary Simon, we've traveled along with him a lot, and he likes to talk about how we've been doing this again since the 1800s. They just used to be in Norwegian, Swedish, and German, but now they're in Somali, Hmong, Spanish. This is not new, highfalutin, or weird. We've been doing this all along. It's just our immigrants have changed. Okay, so when we vote, we basically have more voting hours. So I want to say this right now because you may think, well, it's an off year. We at the League of Women Voters say there are no off years in voting, right? This is our local league, our local government elections, right? There is a lot of elections happening across the state right now. School boards, city councils, all kinds of stuff going on. So every one of you in here is obligated to transform. That's your transformational justice requirement today, is to vote in your local elections. But it is so important. What we find in our local elections, and we know our local elections, of course, I served on a school board, so I think they're really important, but I can tell you they're really important. We're lucky to get, 10, 15, 20% turnout, right, at some of our local races. So this is an effort for us. So lots of great things here. I want to point out, too, the temporary polling places. So county auditor must establish an additional polling place for at least one day on Indian reservations if requested. So this is a big one. We find certainly some of our lowest turnout is in our Native communities, and people have asked sometimes to have a special polling place. It just hasn't been within the bandwidth of counties to do it. So now they do. And there are some dollars that the counties are getting to help make some of this stuff happen. All right, protecting the vote. Any questions so far? Anything? Yeah, we have a question right here. Oh, she's got it. Okay.
Yes, everything you mentioned so far, I believe, would be under one law or act that got passed last year. Am I right on that?
All of these things passed in this last 2023 legislation. Is that what you're asking?
Well, was it one law or several laws?
Oh, one, yeah. So great question. So actually, Restore the Vote became its own bill. It was passed as a separate standalone bill because it was our top priority. Then there was what we call House File 3. And that was all of these little things I'm going through now were almost all under one bill. Yes.
Okay, and was that passed on a bipartisan or almost equally bipartisan? Can you give a little clue on that?
Yes, I can give lots of clues. I will say for Restore the Vote, I was really happy that it ended up being standalone. We worked very hard with the league to communicate with both parties, all parties, I should say. We have more than 2 parties. And we did get 3. We got 3 Republicans to vote yes on Restore the Vote. I would say 10 years ago when we were working on this, it was a 50-50 split. Restore the Vote has consistently been a bipartisan priority and issue. The majority of people who will now be who are formerly incarcerated, who will now be able to vote, are white people living in greater Minnesota. There's no particular political bent to any of us working on restoring the vote to people who were once in prison. This is just a basic justice point. So it's a good, what you're saying is that's the challenge right now. A lot of these issues used to be bipartisan. Automatic voter registration. Actually, if people are concerned about our election integrity, they should want that because it's like, you just proved your ID to me, now we'll vote now, because it'll significantly limit people coming to do same-day registration. Most people who come to same-day registration had a challenge with registering to vote. Now it's significant. So on House File 3, no, we had no Republicans. It was all Democrats. But the issues embedded in here have significantly been bipartisan over the years. So It's a rough time in that regard. Yep. The little green button going. That's okay.
I can yell too if you want.
That's okay. Go for it.
Okay, so a really exciting opportunity is helping high school students, kids 16 to 18, have that pre-registration, and knowing that, that's another big issue, is they need to know that. But it's consummate, it's very important that they know the civics behind all this and that they can be involved and that they can be knowledgeable on the candidates. Is there any kind of work being done to encourage schools to include curriculum to get kids educated on politics and social voting and things like that?
Yeah.
So-
You would think I have planted you because that's the exact perfect question. And the exact follow up. Yeah, so actually, the other big bill we worked on with Republican Dean Erdahl. Dean Erdahl worked with us and others to pass the civics bill, which we've been working on for, I don't know, quite a many years too. And the provision of the civics bill was to try to make sure that civics would be taught in 11th or 12th grade. So that so the idea is exactly what you're saying, that you're getting people ready, just like you're getting them ready for their career, you're getting ready to be a good citizen, learning what civics is. A lot of times now it's taught more at 8th, 9th, 10th. And so they're trying to move it up to 11th, 12th, and then tie that in to the voter registration so you really see and feel what that's like. So, yay! We won that too with Republican support. So, yes, great. Protecting our polling places, this is another thing. Some of you might have remembered before when I was here, we were involved in a lawsuit with the Council of American Islamic Relations to try to ban Atlas Aegis, which was a group trying to recruit mercenaries out of Soldier of Fortune magazine and places to come and guard our polling places. We got them to stand down on that. But there are lots of things that are happening around, as we know, in terms of voter intimidation. We are very blessed to live in Minnesota, for sure. We do not see what other states see. But I will say this. We have at the League of Women Voters, as a request of many different county commissioners, I think we're at about 8 different counties in the last 2 years to testify against groups. There is an active group in the state of Minnesota who wants to wants to make our elections more partisan, as well as to hand count every ballot instead of have a tabulator that assists in the count. We'll talk about that later, all the safeguards we have in place. But when I was testifying, I think in Sherburne County and Carver County, the group that was there when I talked about the fact that all of the county commissioners have evidence that their voters are fair and accurate because they have a post-election review. Every single election goes through a post-election review audit. There's an audit of select precincts, and they're all hand counted, and they're almost all 0%. There's little things they find, like this last year, there's a little fold in a ballot or something like that, but never enough to overthrow an election. Plus, we can, if it's close, I ran 4 levy and bond referendums in my school district. I won 1 by 5 votes. So I know what that's like. But we recounted everything, and it was amazing, the accuracy in voting. It's often voter intention. But my point of all of that is to say that when I was testifying, the group that was testifying in the other direction really openly laughed out loud about the January 6th insurrection. They did not think that was a real thing or a bad thing. that what happened on January 6th is not a partisan thing. Right? It is a fact. It happened. We witnessed it. And there's evidence that's come out of it. It's not about what you or I think. What I was saying to the commissioners, regardless of what you think or feel, look at the evidence. Just go to the evidence. There's so much evidence. So we have on our website, we've started something on lwvmn.org called Elections 411, where we outline every single safeguard that's out there to protect the integrity of the ballot and list all of the different bipartisan articles and reviews and studies that have been done to show that there was no massive voter fraud. I've spoken places where people say, you're being partisan. I'm like, that is not partisan, just a fact, okay? So we can believe what we want on a lot of things. And I think that's the challenge now, right? I mean, I think because I can say that here in this space and what you're looking at around transformation is a lot of times speaking the truth is not pleasant, not fun. It's looked at as silly. It's, what is it? The thing is we have faith, but we also have facts. And that's where we spend a lot of time. So anyway, I want to get to a couple more things. We open up for more questions. And of course, for students, what's really excited at the post-secondary level in colleges is going to make it easier for students to use their valid photo ID for registration. If they want to, also more requirements for colleges to be more robust in how they register students to vote. So that is exciting. A couple other things here. So I'm going to point out candidate filing and contact information. Sounds as boring as could be. That was my personal amendment. I'm very excited about it. Candidates and campaign are required to provide non-government issued email. What does that mean? What we found when we were doing Vote 411, where we send out to every single candidate an invitation to participate in our voter guide, almost half of the candidates, which was over 6,000 in 2022, didn't have an email. And that was one of the number one calls to the Secretary of State's office was people saying, I can't get a hold of my candidate. What we find is there's a lot of people sometimes who run. You know, when I always say, how do you know a good candidate? A candidate is running, they have views, they have issues, but they want to do things for their constituents. They're not running on one grievance. I have a petty grievance, and I'm running on that grievance. People who are trying to not be available for you to reach them during their campaign should give you pause. So now I can say, oh my gosh, because of this requirement, we have almost everybody giving an email. So that's my little personal pitch there to how exciting that was. Yeah, question.
In what material, in all materials and every time they speak?
No, so this is just when they file. So when someone files for office in their candidate filings, that they have to give some email. I mean, you can make up a Gmail, right? It doesn't have to be your home email. Anybody can for free. There still are people who can opt out if there's some concern or reason, but it's really been a wonderful way for both for the public to be able to engage with people, because you can't engage with the P.O. box. That's the challenge, right?
So do you mean that if a person is a candidate, we could contact the Secretary of State and get their email address?
So all that's actually online now. The Secretary of State, the voter file, when you file for office, is on there. But also as part of our Vote 411, all of that is on our candidate guide as well. So yes, so that's exciting. Now, the access to multi-unit housing is huge too, because that is apartments, right? And other long-term care residences, places where people should be able to get information. This is a huge thing for the census, our ability to be accurate in the census. So lots of things. I could keep going, so many things. But I will move on to sort of like my grand finale here and give you the time for some more questions. But so one of the things that I do like to talk about is this whole thing about our elections fair and accurate, okay? So we are partners with the Citizens for Election Integrity Minnesota. And they have been around since 2006. We're actually part of the Al Franken Coleman recount and just every kind of big recounts that we've had. And what we do is we do this real exciting thing of witnessing the post-election review, and it is a little like watching paint dry. However, it is, but I'm not, I should sell it up because we need volunteers. So I'm hoping some of you will want to do this. But what is great is the post-election review. A lot of people just don't know that we have this audit. We have two things that go on in Minnesota. One is we have a public accuracy test of all the voting machines. So everyone knows the word Dominion now, right? We know all these voting machines. I'd like to point out that our voting machines actually are tabulators. That reminder that the tabulators, actually Republican Secretary of State Mary Kiffmeyer brought us the machines. She brought the tabulators in as a way to protect people's vote integrity of their vote, because at that time, the idea was if somebody mismarked or didn't do something right, if you put it through the scanner, it would go, you didn't do it right. You'd know and have a chance to update your ballot. Now, that's all our machines do, right? They tabulate them and they bring them in, and they're not connected to the internet at all. At the very, very end, when the votes have, everything has been delivered to the Secretary of State's office, or to the county auditor's office, there's one final upload, I think, that goes through, but that is a secondary copy of what is there prior to. So the idea that, again, that our voting machines are somehow, they are there for the purpose to protect the integrity of the election, rather than, we have what, 3 million voters in Minnesota. We hand count every vote. And having been part of a recount, I can tell you, you're like, well, what did they really mean by that circle, right? So there are those little pieces in our puzzle, but the big way you deal with that, like any big business would in auditing, is, if the election's close, we have an automatic recount. If a candidate really feels like there was something wrong, they can request a recount. So we have lots of assurances. So we're very excited about the post-election reviews. No one ever used to come to them. And but now they do, because they're kind of interested. And so we actually are going to try to have volunteers at all 87 counties during 2024. Because our biggest question that people have now, we're very fortunate in Minnesota. We will have terrific voter registration, especially after our voting, after in 2024, lots of people registered. But our concern is mis and disinformation about the elections. And one of the best things we can do is to continue to tell the truth, continue to share the facts. These are the facts. We have a post-election review. So an example I'll give, what our sort of election official superstar, Deb Erickson, up in Crow Wing County in Brainerd. She's awesome. She's on a lot of national groups. In Brainerd, in Crow Wing County, a lot of election deniers there petitioned their county to do something. So they added one more county to their post-election review, meaning one more precinct. So what they do is they just randomly pick precincts from different races to count and see. And she's like, I don't care if she's like, that's fine. We'll count after the election. Be happy to hand count as many as you want, because I know they're going to be fair and accurate. And it reminds people, and it gives the evidence, again, that they are. So that is the consistent work. A lot of times, what's exciting is the legislature, right? And it's exciting to work for bills, and it's exciting to be on the front line, and it's exciting to stand up for those things. And we do those things, we do those things. But over time, it is still also, and I try to add a little bit of enthusiasm behind it, hopefully, that the steady work we all do to be election judges, to show up for post-election review, to learn about the candidates. Those are all still the underpinnings to a successful election process. If you're concerned about mis and disinformation, learn about it, talk to people, get them out to vote. That's the best way to get through it. Couple of things. Shocker, shocker, January 19th, folks. That is when our elections start for 2024. So there you go, January 19th, early voting for the presidential primary. So we started last year, or 4 years ago, we went from having our partisan, this is a partisan race, right? You have to declare a party and pick who you want to be run for office. But it's done now in the electoral process rather than at your caucus. And so now you get to vote. But that does mean January 9th. That just blows me away. So it's going to be a very busy year, but people will have a chance to early vote. So next year, it's going to be busy, busy, busy. I'm going to end with this fabulous quote, which I always love, and then I'm going to show you a little bit about our voter guide this year, and then take any other questions. But I love John Lewis. I'll always love John Lewis, and he has, of course, been, I mean, imagine this man's life. The perspective of somebody who couldn't, in our lifetime drink from the same drinking fountains we drank from. I mean, it just blows you away to become who he became and to fight so passionately for voter rights. We miss him. But I love his perspective. He always said, ours is not the struggle one day, 1 week, 1 year. It's not the struggle of one judicial appointment or presidential term. Ours is the struggle of a lifetime or even many lifetimes, and each one of us in every generation must do our part. And so that's really what we do. We all do whatever it is. Sometimes our candidates that we like win, sometimes they don't. Things happen, but we don't give up. We keep doing our part. So, very exciting. Okay, any questions? I'm going to show you a quick little blurb here. Okay, I'll answer questions while I remember how to get out of this thing. Here we go. Yeah, question. Yeah. 2 mics are coming.
Thank
Yeah.
you. I agree with you that you just have to keep doing your part here, there, and everything. And the Dean Erdahl's bill, which he tried to pass for years, passing is a big step in Minnesota. But what do you do in the face of the reduced credibility or what we see in polls that people's belief in democracy is at the core of their suspicion of the voting process? So what is there that we can do, or what action can be taken to restore faith in democracy as a process itself?
Yeah, great question. I mean, democracy, obviously a lot of people for whom many people feel like maybe democracy isn't going to work for them, right? Because it's just not going to get there that way. So when you look at gerrymandering and redistricting, so the League also, we very much advocate for redistricting. I also need to put a plug in for the ERA, so the Equal Rights Amendment. You're going to hear from your great friend Betty Folliard in November. We work really closely with Betty and Suzanne and her team. We did reaffirm the ERA federally, although it was more symbolic. And we did get actually 9 Republican votes in the Senate to put the ERA on this as a constitutional amendment to be on the ballot. But that did not this last time. That's a whole nother. We'll let Betty talk about that and come back for Betty in November. But you're kind of, it gets to this point of, doesn't everyone want equal rights? Don't we all want democracy? I don't understand, right? So there are some things that we don't understand. And I can't tell you, the best thing I can think of is, like all of us, the same with Christianity or anything else. I mean, I've been kicked out of a Bible study, I'll just tell you that, because my version of the gospel was very different than the people I was studying with. I'm like, I don't get this. So we have different points of view no matter where we are. But we can be a role model, right? That's the best we can do. We can continue to have relationships with people who aren't like us. That means, we don't just, the divide is what's the problem, right? We all know people who believe things different than we do. Whether it's our faith or our politics or how we make casserole, So we have to stay engaged in those conversations. Don't be part of the problem. And that's when we interviewed 2 senators, Dave Senjum, Republican from Winona, and Susan Kent, my Republican senator from my area, Woodbury, after they were done. Neither of them were running for re-election, and we had a little interview with them, and we're like, well, what advice can you give? And their advice was honor compromise. Because the problem is voters are shaping the partisanship, because voters tend to only reward those candidates who did everything they wanted them to do, right? that compromise used to be the order of the day. It is not anymore. And all of us can say, you know, I get that this candidate, that candidate, you might not get everything you want. You might not be able to do it. And I know, again, the privilege I feel I had from having served as a school board member was like, all of a sudden it's like, oh my God, I'm in charge of, 19,000 students and 11 bargaining units and 90,000 voters. I mean, it's daunting. There's no way you can make everybody happy, right? So I think we have to keep doing the work and keep talking to people and bringing them to sources of information. And that it's that steady stream. We're the aquifer. We keep the water running. So I know that might not be a comforting, but when you look at history, it's so comforting to look at history. I mean, I think John Lewis. Are you kidding? I mean, look at the life. Can't drink on a drinking fountain, United States congressperson. Change happens all the time. It has happened. It will continue to happen. It will not happen if people don't just stay the course, right? We got to keep on. Really quick. Yeah, go ahead, and then I'll show you.
I really appreciated that you revealed a full array of things for people that are introverts and people that are extroverts to kind of consider ways they can care and be involved in this process. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And that is a really good point. I mean, back in the day, when I was in college and stuff, I could get on, I didn't have anything, but I had my feet. I could get on a bus. I could protest. I could have a sign. I could do those things. But now I can do different things, right? So we all have some place we can plug in. If nothing else, you can contribute to organizations that are working on this. You can be involved, but you can just talk to folks. But minimally, educate yourselves, because it all starts with there. All transformation starts with being educated ourselves so that we can have those conversations and be that change in the world. Just really quick, if you go to our website, we've got all this up there. How do I register to vote? I moved. Do I have the right address? I need to verify it. We have all the candidate forums, the ballot information. We also have on here how to be a voter. How do I vote in person? Where do I vote? What if I vote from home? We tell people how to put their absentee ballot together. Where can I learn about the candidates? We give lots of different places to find out information of candidates. Then we also have all the voting fact sheets. I won't click on all these, but these are all clickable. How our elections work, why we know our votes are fair and accurate. And bottom line, get involved. Engage high school students. Anyone who's working in a high school will go and do a voter registration any day of the week. Our county voter engagement teams are becoming really popular. If you are interested, I've got stuff there that has all our, you all can find me. But really, if you want to be part of our post-election review team to observe and report out the accuracy of our election this year, connect with a local league, join a local league. So there's lots of ways to get involved, to deal with, as you say, being involved in our democracy. So, lots there, right? Yeah. Okay, I'm going to go back to the slides because I think you have some concluding slides as well. So sorry about that. We get the slideshow going back. I like to think, too, for us, being around 104 years, I'll try to get back to it here. And we'll just get to these last slides. That's all I have to say to myself. Gee, were things better 104 years ago? Think of how much has changed, right? And that's because we all did our part. Okay. Yeah. Say that again? Yes, absolutely. Yeah, there we go.
Michelle said that I could share this with you. I'm a member of the Golden Valley League of Women Voters and a proud Robbinsdale former educator. One of the thrills of my post-retirement was to register kids to vote at Cooper High School. And 200 kids in one day, and they knew how important education was before voting. So, and now, next Sunday, please welcome a group of Westminster youth led by Associate Pastor Alexander Jacob and Olivia King, Director of Youth Ministries, sharing lessons from their recent service learning trip to Kentucky. We look forward to seeing you then, and we thank Michelle for being with
Yay.
us today.
Taking the time to learn today, you guys. And thanks to Carol Frisch for inviting me, too.